Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take those dense policy papers, the really critical research, sometimes even institutional blueprints.
Yeah, the tough stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we try to boil it all down to the insights you actually need and, do it fast.
Get straight to the point.
That's the idea. So today, we're plunging into something that sounds maybe a bit mundane. File formats. The ones used every day in government offices.
Right, like .docs files, PDFs, that sort of thing.
But here's the twist. Beneath that surface, apparently, lies a massive ethical problem.
We're talking potentially $1 billion.
$1 billion, yeah. And huge strategic risks, too. It's not just about money.
And interestingly, a clear path towards what the sources call national digital self-reliance.
That's absolutely right. This isn't some, academic debate about software preference. It's not about whether you like Word or something else.
No.
No, it's framed as an economic and, frankly, a moral indictment of how things are currently done in many institutions.
Okay, so what are we working with today? What are the sources? We're dissecting a set of ethical memoranda, some policy notes. They seem to originate primarily from an AI researcher named Chandra Nath.
Chandra Nath, okay.
And they're really aimed at, revolutionizing how public institutions handle their documents, particularly focused on India's Ministry of Defense, the MOD.
The MOD specifically. Interesting.
And the core message is, let's just say it's blunt.
How blunt?
It basically says, continuing to rely on these proprietary document formats, it's a massive waste of money, it's a strategic vulnerability, and ethically, it's just wrong, a failure.
Wow, okay. Strong words. So our mission today, for you listening, is to give you a really solid grasp of this blueprint for reform they're proposing.
Yeah, we want to synthesize the arguments, the ethical side, the financial side, the strategic risks.
All pointing towards mandating open standards.
Yeah.
Things like ODF.
ODF, the open document format, yes. And also PDFA, that's the archival standard for PDF.
Right. So by the end of this, you should understand why your government may be using Microsoft Word isn't just like a minor choice. It's potentially a really costly decision.
With national security implications, even.
Exactly. And maybe we should start with the money, because that's often what grabs attention first.
Good idea. Hit us with the shock factor. What are the numbers?
Okay, so the sources get really specific on the cost-benefit analysis. They project the one-time cost to implement this whole shift.
Across the entire mold, which is huge.
Huge, yes. A 5-year transition plan covering training, setting up infrastructure, migrating old archives.
Okay, what's the number?
Estimated at around INR 500 crore.
500 crore rupees. Okay, that's a chunk of change, not insignificant.
It is, but hold that number. Because against that one-time cost, the updated economic model projects the recurring annual savings.
Yeah.
The money saved every single year after the transition.
Okay.
Is projected to be an astonishing INR 8,825 crore.
Wait. Say that again? 8,800.
8,825 crore rupees every year. That's over $1 billion US.
Annually.
Annually. So you're looking at potentially recovering that initial 500 crore investment almost 17 times over in the first year alone.
Leaving a net benefit of, over 8,300 crore in year one?
Precisely. I mean, if it was just about the money, the case would be overwhelming.
It seems hard to argue with that math.
But it's not just the fiscal side. As we unpack the strategic arguments, the ethical ones, you start to see why the sources frame this transition as, essential for governmental integrity itself.
Okay, so let's dive into that foundational argument first. The one Chandra Nath really emphasizes in these memos,
Which is?
that using proprietary formats like docs in public organizations is, in itself, a form of structural impropriety.
Structural impropriety. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, think about the core ethical principle here. A public body, like the MUD, operates on public trust, right?
Okay.
It's funded by taxpayers.
Right, it's a custodian.
Exactly, a custodian of public trust and resources. So the argument goes, it's improper and unethical for that body to mandate the use of a specific proprietary commercially licensed product.
Like Microsoft Word.
When there are free, equally capable, and importantly, openly documented alternatives available, like LibreOffice using ODF.
So it's not just about the government paying for licenses itself.
No, it's broader than that.
It's that they're implicitly forcing citizens, or maybe businesses that interact with them, to also use that proprietary software.
Precisely. Think about it. If you, as a citizen or maybe a small business vendor, need to submit an official form or a proposal to the mod, and their rule says only docs files accepted.
Then I either have to buy Microsoft Office or find someone who has it. I'm forced into that commercial ecosystem just to interact with my own government.
Exactly right. And this, according to the sources, transforms what should just be a neutral way to exchange information
Like a standard form.
into what they actually call a monopoly vector.
Monopoly vector. Okay.
Yeah. It basically funnels public money and the private money of citizens and businesses towards one specific company's profit. It creates a captive market.
So mandating that closed format becomes like an official government endorsement of that company's whole suite of products.
That's the argument, an institutional endorsement. And that violates principles of fairness, equal access, and ultimately public trust. It's baked right into the daily workflow.
And this structural issue, this sort of ethical problem, it feeds directly into strategic weaknesses, doesn't it? Especially for somewhere like the Ministry of Defense or high-level research labs.
Absolutely. That's the next logical step in the argument. If you build your institution's processes around a closed proprietary format,
You're essentially building in what the sources call hidden dependency.
hidden dependency, it's a great phrase because it's insidious, right?
Yeah.
Think about a document created years ago in a specific version of Word.
Okay.
To be absolutely sure you can read it correctly, verify it, maybe even reuse parts of it reliably, you need the tools from that original commercial gatekeeper.
The company that made the format.
Yes, and this fundamentally undermines what the sources call academic sovereignty, but even more critically for the mod, digital sovereignty.
Digital sovereignty, meaning control over your own digital information and systems.
Precisely. And for a defense establishment, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's presented as a serious operational risk.
Okay, let's get specific about that operational risk. What could actually happen if a defense organization is sort of held hostage by its file formats?
Well, the sources point to a few scenarios. First, just the basic inability to open critical old documents.
Why? Because the software version changed or the license lapsed.
Could be either.
Yeah,
Licenses expire, or maybe more commonly, a new version of the proprietary software comes out and suddenly doesn't render the old files quite right. Backward compatibility isn't always perfect, especially with complex documents.
I've seen that happen even with simple documents.
Yeah.
Layouts go haywire.
Exactly. Second risk, being forced into continuous, expensive upgrades. The vendor decides when you need to upgrade, not you.
And those upgrades might not even align with, say, national security priorities or budgets at that moment. You're just stuck on their roadmap.
You're on their cycle. The vendor effectively controls access to your own institutional archive.
That seems completely counter to the idea of national self-reliance, which is the big theme in defense circles.
It does, doesn't it? If your core intellectual output, everything from procurement specs to strategic plans to research reports, is locked behind a commercial license key.
You're effectively outsourcing access to your own history, your own knowledge base.
That's the strategic vulnerability in a nutshell. It's systemic. Imagine needing to access vital operational records from 20 years ago.
Standard practice in military archives.
Right. But if those records are only reliably accessible using a specific, constantly changing, commercially controlled piece of software.
Then you're paying a perpetual tax just to read your own
A
files.
perpetual tax, yes. And you face a perpetual strategic risk. What if the vendor gets bought, changes its terms, stops supporting that old version, pulls out of the country?
Your documents might be physically stored, but intellectually they could become inaccessible, locked away.
Exactly, lost knowledge.
Okay, so beyond the big institutional vulnerability, the sources also talk about a specific problem related to scholarly and archival integrity, especially for things like scientific reports, legal contracts, policy documents.
Yes, this is about the fidelity of the document itself over time.
How reliable is the information?
Precisely. And proprietary formats are described quite harshly here. They're called antithetical to the principles of accuracy, reproducibility, and scholarly permanence.
Antithetical. Why so strong?
Because of inherent instability. A proprietary file format like .docs is fundamentally tied to the rendering engine of the specific application, Microsoft Word in this case.
What does rendering engine mean in practice?
It means how the software decides to display the document on the screen or on paper. The fonts, the spacing, the line breaks, where images go.
Okay.
So imagine you create a complex technical report. You spend ages getting the equations just right, the tables aligned, the footnotes perfect in Word.
Been there.
Then you email it, your colleague opens it, maybe they have a slightly different version of Word, or they're on a Mac instead of Windows.
Right.
And suddenly the pagination is different. Lines break in weird places. That carefully formatted table now spans across 2 pages. The equation symbols look wrong.
Chaos. The document itself seems to change.
It does change, visually and structurally. That document, which might be an official record or a crucial piece of research, lacks stability. Its appearance depends entirely on the commercial software environment used to view it.
That complete loss of permanence seems disastrous for anything meant to be archived or relied upon as a definitive record.
It is. A document needs to mean the same thing, look the same way today as it does in 10 or 20 years, regardless of what software you use.
How do open standards achieve that?
Well, take something like LaTeX, which the sources highlight, or even documents properly created in ODF and then archived as PDFA. They're designed differently. They often focus on separating the content from the presentation. In LaTeX, for example, you mark up the structure. This is a section heading, this is a list, and the system handles the layout consistently. The resulting files, especially PDFA, are designed to be self-contained and platform independent.
So what you create today will look exactly the same when opened a decade from now, no matter the computer or software.
That's the goal, yes. Especially with PDFA, which we'll get into. It avoids that drift, that instability caused by relying on one company's changing rendering engine.
This brings up another sharp point from the memos, the idea of competence. They say, quite directly, ignorance is not innocence. What's that aimed at?
It's aimed squarely at the bureaucratic resistance to change. It's challenging the excuse that staff are simply unfamiliar with open standards like ODF or PDFA or structured tools like LaTeX.
So saying, I don't know how to use LibreOffice isn't a valid reason not to.
According to these sources, no, not anymore. They argue that training officers, faculty, administrators in these free, open, accessible standards should be considered a basic professional competence in the digital age.
It's part of the job description now.
It should be. The sources argue that continuing to circulate closed templates, insisting on docs, and rejecting open alternatives actually betrays the purpose of professional education, which should be about advancing knowledge through discipline and clarity, not clinging to outdated, costly tools.
So the argument is, if a public servant insists on using a tool that demonstrably adds cost and strategic risk, that's not just personal preference anymore. It's potentially a dereliction of duty, a failure to operate with fiscal and technical integrity.
It's framed as a failure of stewardship, yes. The MOD, like any public body, is a steward of national resources and knowledge. They have a duty to use tools that maximize durability, ensure interoperability, and are cost-effective.
And the argument is that proprietary formats fail on all 3 of those counts.
That's the core ethical and strategic case laid out in the sources.
Okay, so the ethical and strategic arguments make a strong case for why this change is needed. Now, let's follow the money. The fiscal case seems to reveal just how bad the current situation might be.
Yeah, this is where it moves from principles to, well, rupees. And the picture painted is one of significant ongoing financial drain.
The most obvious drain, I guess, is software licenses, paying for all those copies of Microsoft Office year after year.
That's the starting point. The sources call it a fiscal contradiction. Public bodies demand commercial software, which locks them in, forcing them to perpetually pay for licenses, updates, support.
Money that could presumably be spent on actual defense capabilities or research or personnel.
Exactly. Especially when open source alternatives like LibreOffice are available. They are, by definition, free of those licensing costs. And they're often supported by a global community, not just one vendor.
Let's put some numbers on that. You mentioned updated economic models from Chandranath. What does it say about potential savings just from licenses?
Okay, so the model uses what seems like a conservative baseline. It assumes a minimum ICT information and communications technology spend within the broader defense ecosystem of about INR 5,000 crore.
That's the baseline spending.
Right. Then, based on looking at similar institutional shifts around the world, they project that just by eliminating proprietary software licenses and the related costs of vendor lock-in.
Just swapping out Office for LibreOffice
Don't
eventually.
switch, yeah. That alone is projected to yield a saving of around 60% on that baseline software expenditure.
60% of 5,000 crore. That's INR 3,000 crore.
Annually.
Annually. Just from switching the Office suite and avoiding those ongoing license fees and forced upgrade costs associated with being locked in?
And you're saying this isn't just theoretical. There are real-world examples.
Absolutely. The sources don't just invent these numbers. They specifically point to benchmarks like the Munich LiMux project in Germany.
Ah, yes, the LiMux project. That was a big deal. It was. The city of Munich shifted, I think it was around 15,000 desktop computers from Windows and proprietary software to Linux and OpenOffice.
And the result?
They reported savings of over 4 million in just the first year, primarily from licenses.
4 million euros. Significant.
But here's a crucial extra detail they found. It wasn't just license savings. They also saw a massive drop in calls to their IT support desk.
Really? Why? Was the open source stuff more stable?
Apparently, yes. It suggests the open source environment was more reliable, less prone to the kinds of glitches and forced incompatibility issues that often come with proprietary software updates. It supports the idea that open standards can actually be more robust.
Okay, before we move on from the budget figures, I need to push back a little bit. You mentioned that huge annual saving INR 8,825 crore.
Yes.
But the one-time implementation cost was only INR 500 crore. Now, for a massive, complex institution like the Indian Ministry of Defense, research, procurement, finance, Army, Navy, Air Force, 500 crore to train everyone, migrate everything, set up systems. It sounds, frankly, incredibly low.
That's a fair challenge. It does seem low on the surface.
What's baked into that cost model? How do they keep it so contained? And where's the biggest risk of it blowing out?
Okay, good questions. The reason the cost model is contained, according to the plan outlined, is because the strategy is not a big bang, top-down, retrain everyone immediately approach.
Ah, okay. It's phased.
Exactly. That INR 500 crore is primarily allocated to a few key things. First, setting up the dedicated task force, the OSI, and the core infrastructure. Things like servers for archive conversion, developing central training materials.
Central resources.
Second, the initial training budget isn't for mass training. It's focused on a train-the-trainer model, creating internal experts and champions within specific key units.
So they handle the rollout internally.
That's the idea. They become the support structure, reduces reliance on expensive external contractors. Third, there's budget for the technical work, integrating ODF and PDFA properly into existing MODI systems, changing templates, removing those hidden proprietary dependencies in databases or internal apps.
So the risk of a budget overrun comes if, what? The initial audit misses things, or the culture resists too hard.
Precisely. The risk is if that Phase I audit isn't thorough enough, or if the cultural pushback is so strong that they do end up needing massive, immediate external training contracts, which, ironically, would just recreate the kind of dependency they're trying to escape.
Right. Pay consultants millions to teach people how to use free software.
Exactly. But the model itself is designed to be lean by focusing on building internal competence first. That's how they keep the initial estimate down.
Okay, that makes more sense. It hinges on a smart, phased rollout. But now we get to what the sources call the deeper and more disturbing consequence.
Yes.
The cottage industry of extraction. This sounds bad. This is where the waste gets really absurd.
This is arguably the most damning part of the analysis. It explains a big chunk of the rest of those projected savings, beyond just licenses.
So what is this cottage industry?
It's what happens when a bureaucracy gets so addicted to a specific proprietary standard, like Word, that it ends up creating completely artificial, unnecessary labor. Labor designed to compensate for the fact that open source tools could do the job automatically, for free.
Artificial labor. How does a document end up costing, as the sources claim, INR 50 to 100 per page for no intellectual value added? That sounds insane.
It does. Let's trace the journey of a typical document caught in this bureaucratic loop, based on the description in the sources.
Okay, walk me through it.
Step 1. Drafting. Maybe a researcher or a policy analyst drafts a report. Perhaps they use a simple text editor, or LaTeX, or even LibreOffice. The initial output is clean, structured.
Makes sense. They use the tool that works best for them.
Step 2. Bureaucratic mandate. The proprietary hurdle. The document goes up the chain, it hits a clerical stage, or maybe a final review board, and there's an old rule. An outdated policy.
Like all submissions must use the official mod template version 3.
Exactly, and that template is, inevitably, a .docs file. And maybe it relies on specific proprietary fonts that aren't standard.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Step 3, forced conversion. The waste begins. Now, the staff at this stage, maybe they lack training, maybe policy forbids it, They don't just cleanly convert the file using an open tool. No. Instead, they might outsource the task or do it manually in-house. They take the perfectly good original document and they forcibly convert it or maybe even copy-paste the text into that mandated proprietary Word template.
Oh dear. That sounds like it would break all the formatting.
It often does. Which leads to step 4, artificial labor. Because Word's rendering engine is different, the layout breaks. So now staff have to manually reflow the entire document. Meaning they painstakingly adjust margins, fix page breaks that shifted, maybe manually reapply those special proprietary fonts, correct tables that got mangled, reinsert images. It's incredibly laborious, it's prone to introducing new errors, and crucially, it adds zero intellectual value to the content.
They're just fixing problems that were created by forcing it into Word in the first place.
Precisely. And then, step 5, finalization and payment. After all this manual fixing work that someone is getting paid for, either internal staff time or an external vendor,
Right.
that docs file is then often exported back into a PDF for final signature, printing, or archiving, sometimes using another piece of commercial software like Adobe Acrobat, adding yet another potential license cost.
Hang on. So, taxpayer money, public funds, are being spent paying people potentially up to 100 rupees a page
to manually fix formatting issues.
They were deliberately introduced by insisting on using a proprietary format.
When the whole process could likely have been avoided by using open standards correctly from the start.
That's bureaucratic waste on an epic scale.
It's described as ethically indefensible, a profound misuse of authority and public funds. This is where that quote comes from. Ignorance has become an income stream.
Wow. The system is literally paying people to compensate for its own refusal to adopt efficient, free tools.
The system incentivizes this artificial labor because the underlying adherence to the proprietary format remains unchallenged.
So eliminating just this specific paid manual conversion step is a significant saving in itself.
It is. The sources estimate that cutting out this practice contributes roughly another 0.5% in recurring savings, mostly under administrative overheads. It feeds into that big INR 8,825 crore annual benefit figure.
Because an honest system, as they say, should focus intellectual labor on actual content, not this kind of make-work formatting churn.
Exactly, not converting public intellectual work into an extraction industry, as they put it.
Okay, let's pull the fiscal threads together then. We have the big savings from licenses at 3,000 crore, and then additional savings from eliminating the bizarre manual conversion waste plus other efficiencies, adding up to that total recurring benefit of INR 8,825 crore annually.
That's the updated projection, yes.
How does that number stack up against the Muddy's overall budget, just for context?
Good question. The sources contextualize it against the likely FY 2025-26 defense budget, which is in the realm of INR 6 lakh crore.
6 trillion rupees.
Okay, so the projected saving of 8,825 crore is actually only about 1.3% to 1.4% of the total defense outlay.
So while it's a huge number in absolute terms, as a percentage of the whole defense budget, it's actually quite small.
Relatively small, yes. And this is important because it makes the goal seem much more fiscally plausible. It's not some fantasy number. It's consistent with efficiency savings seen in similar large-scale digital reforms globally. It's within the realm of possibility.
And they also looked at sort of worst-case scenarios. What if the implementation is slow or only partially successful?
Yes, the sensitivity analysis is crucial here, even if they only achieve a minimal 25% of the projected savings.
Just a quarter of the goal.
That still yields INR 2,206 crore in savings every single year.
Over 2,200 crore annually, which, over a decade, is more than INR 22,000 crore.
Exactly. So the sources argue very strongly that the financial case is just unassailable. The initial investment of 500 crore is paid back so quickly, even in pessimistic scenarios, that delaying the transition is presented as simple fiscal negligence. Continuing the status quo is actively choosing to waste money.
All right, moving beyond the money and the ethics, let's get into the technical arguments. Because the sources don't just say open standards are cheaper, they argue they're actually better for the job, offering something called principled craftsmanship.
Yes, this is about the inherent qualities of the formats themselves and the tools used to create them. It's arguing for technical superiority, not just cost avoidance.
So let's properly introduce the key open standards they advocate for. First up, ODF.
Right. ODF stands for the Open Document Format. Its official standard is ISO 26300. This is the internationally recognized XML-based standard specifically designed for office documents, text documents, spreadsheets, presentations, the editable stuff.
XML-based meaning the underlying structure is text, readable by machines, not some secret binary code.
Exactly. It's transparent. And it's the native format for suites like LibreOffice and other open office tools. It's the direct, non-proprietary alternative to formats like .docx or .xlsx.
So using ODF ensures the file format itself isn't controlled by one company. It's open, auditable.
Precisely. It guarantees interoperability for the creation and editing phase. As long as software adheres to the ISO standard, it should be able to open, edit, and save ODF files reliably. That's the whole point.
Okay, ODF for editable documents. Then there's the one for long-term storage, PDFA. Most people know PDF, but what's the A about? Why is this specific version so critical for institutions like the Mod?
The A is crucial. It stands for archival. So PDFA, ISO 19005, isn't just any PDF. It's a very specific, highly constrained subset of the PDF standard.
Constrained, meaning it removes features.
Yes, deliberately. It's engineered purely for long-term preservation and future-proof accessibility. Its main goal isn't easy editing, it's absolute fidelity.
Fidelity meaning?
Meaning ensuring that the document will look exactly the same, visually identical decades from now, no matter what software you use to view it, what operating system you're on, or even what fonts you have installed on your machine at that future time.
How does it technically guarantee that kind of, well, radical stability, that independence from the viewing environment?
Through those constraints. The absolute key requirement for PDFA is that the document must be 100% self-contained.
Self-contained.
Yes. Think about that problem we discussed with Word files needing specific fonts installed on the computer.
Right, the missing font issue that messes up the layout.
PDFA solves this with mandatory font embedding. Every single font used within the document must be embedded directly inside the PDFA file itself.
So the document carries its own fonts with it, like a backpack.
Exactly like that. It eliminates that external dependency. The document doesn't need to look outside itself to render correctly.
Smart. What else does it constrain?
It strictly forbids things that could compromise long-term stability or access. Things like encryption, audio or video content, JavaScript, external hyperlinks that might break, executable files. Anything dynamic or dependent on external players is stripped out.
So it becomes a pure, stable, visual record of the document as it was finalized.
Precisely. An immutable snapshot. And some higher levels, like PDFA3, even allow you to embed the original source data file, like the ODF text file or an XML data file or a spreadsheet, within the archival PDF.
Oh, interesting. So you have the perfect visual record, the PDFA, and the original editable data securely packaged together.
Yes. Best of both worlds for archiving. The immutable record and the source traveling together.
That technical separation, the document being independent of the software used to view it, feels like a huge leap for archival integrity compared to proprietary formats.
It is. It's designed for exactly that purpose.
Okay. And the third tool mentioned is LaTeX. Now, this often gets stereotyped as something only scientists or mathematicians use, right? With all the code.
It's a stereotype, yes.
So why are these sources recommending it for potentially general policy documents or defense reports? What's this principled craftsmanship it supposedly offers?
LaTeX is highlighted because it enforces discipline in the creation process. It's technically a typesetting system, not a word processor in the typical sense.
What's the key difference?
The key difference is the strict separation of content and presentation. In a YZYG editor like Word, what you see is what you get. You're constantly fiddling with fonts, margins, bolding, italics while you write the actual text. The two are mixed together.
Right. You format as you go.
In LaTeX, you don't do that. You focus only on the content and its logical structure. You write your text and use simple commands to mark it up. Section introduction, begin itemize, first point, end itemize, refigure one. You define the what, not the how.
So you're telling the system, this is a heading, this is a list item, refer to that figure.
Exactly. Then, separately, there's a style definition, a document class or style file, that tells the edText engine how to format all those elements consistently, what font headings should use, how lists should be indented, how figures should be numbered and placed.
So the engine does the layout work automatically based on those rules.
Yes, and it does it with incredible typographic precision and consistency. Things like kerning, ligatures, justification, placement of figures and tables. It handles it beautifully based on established typographic principles.
So the principled craftsmanship isn't about making officers learn complex coding. It's about enforcing a more structured, disciplined way of thinking about the document. focusing on substance over superficial formatting during drafting.
That's a big part of it. It restores integrity by ensuring consistency and preventing that accidental layout drift you get in Word when things get moved around. For long, complex documents like technical manuals, major reports, research papers, where absolute consistency, accurate cross-referencing, and reproducibility are paramount. LaTeX offers a technically superior, disciplined, and completely open foundation.
Okay, this technical superiority leads us directly to tackling that common defense of the status quo, the pushback you always hear, the myth of editability.
Ah, yes, the classic line.
We need to use Word because docs files can be edited, but PDF files can't. The sources call this argument, what was it? Technically incorrect and ethically misguided.
It is flawed. Deeply flawed on two main levels, according to this analysis.
What's the first level?
First, it fundamentally misunderstands the purpose of official documentation within a public institution. What is the goal of an approved policy document, a signed contract, a finalized defense assessment report?
It's supposed to be the official agreed-upon record, right? Stable, accountable.
Exactly. The goal isn't infinite editability. The goal is fidelity and accountability. Once a document goes through the review process, gets the necessary approvals, is signed off, it must become an immutable record. It represents an institutional commitment, a point of fact, a legal obligation.
So editability is really useful during the drafting and review phase.
Absolutely essential then.
But after approval, immutability becomes the priority. You need to know that the document you're looking at is the final official version, unchanged.
Precisely. That's why, as the sources point out, PDFs is the canonical record of reference in academic publishing worldwide. Once a paper is accepted and published as a PDF, that's it. That's the version of record.
So, by constantly advocating for proprietary formats based on their editability after the approval stage, the argument is that institutions are actually encouraging a culture where documents can be easily, perhaps invisibly, altered, leading to instability.
Yes. It encourages an environment of potentially uncontrolled alteration and perpetual instability, undermining the very idea of a fixed, reliable official record.
Okay, that's the first flaw, misunderstanding the purpose. What's the second flaw in the PDFs can't be edited argument?
The second flaw is that it's just technically wrong. The claim that you need expensive proprietary software, typically Adobe Acrobat Pro, to make any changes to a PDF is simply false.
It's not true.
It's not true. Modern, free, open-source tools exist that provide significant capabilities for working with PDFs, including editing and annotation, in a transparent and verifiable way.
Like what? What tools do the sources mention?
They specifically list tools like LibreOffice Draw, which is part of the free LibreOffice suite. It can actually open PDF files and allow for direct modification of text and objects, though it's best for minor edits.
Okay. What else?
They mention Ocular, which is a very powerful document viewer available on Linux and other platforms. It has excellent annotation capabilities, highlighting, adding notes, drawing, all using standard PDF annotation features that are part of the open spec.
So you can comment and review without changing the original text.
Exactly. And they also mention PDF Arranger, another free tool specifically for manipulating PDF pages, reordering them, deleting pages, splitting or merging documents.
So the idea that public offices have to pay for Adobe Acrobat licenses just to make minor edits or add comments or reorder pages in a PDF.
It's essentially paying for ignorance. They're funding the continued monetization of capabilities that the Open PDF standard itself and free software implementations of it already provide.
It's another facet of that dependency created by not knowing or not trusting the open alternatives.
That's the core technical takeaway. The open standards don't just save money, they liberate institutions from these false commercial constraints and offer better ways to ensure document integrity.
So if the proprietary world encourages this sort of messy, unstable, combined process, the open standards world allows for, or even mandates, a much cleaner, more disciplined workflow.
Yes, a proper three-stage workflow. This is presented as the way to move mod practices from potential chaos to clear accountability.
What are the three stages?
Stage 1, drafting and collaboration. This should happen using structured tools, maybe LaTeX for complex reports, Markdown for simpler text, or ODF editors like LibreOffice Writer for general documents. Ideally, these drafts should be kept under version control, like Git.
So every change is tracked during creation.
Every change is potentially auditable. Full transparency during the creative phase.
Stage 2.
Stage 2, review and commentary. This is done using non-destructive methods. either through standard PDF annotations, comments, highlights, made on a draft PDF version, or using the track changes features within the open ODF formats. The key is that the original structure remains intact. The comments are layered on top or tracked explicitly.
So reviewers aren't directly altering the core text in untracked ways.
Correct. And finally, stage 3, final publication and archiving. Once all reviews are done and approvals are given, the document is compiled or exported into the final immutable format, PDFA.
The self-contained, stable archival version.
Exactly. That becomes the Vertrekker. Portable, secure, ready for long-term storage, maybe integrated with the National Archives.
That three-stage model really clarifies the distinction. Editability is crucial in stage 1 and 2. Immutability is paramount in stage 3.
Precisely. And the argument is that Word, by blurring these stages and encouraging easy, untracked edits, even on final versions, inherently leads to that uncontrolled alteration and perpetual instability. Adopting the open standards workflow isn't just a technical switch, it's a procedural intervention designed to guarantee accountability.
Okay, so we've got the ethical case, the massive financial case, and now a strong technical case for why open standards are arguably superior. But the big question is always, can it actually be done? Especially in a huge, complex organization like a Ministry of Defense.
And that's where looking at global precedents becomes really important. The sources emphasize this isn't some theoretical fantasy. It's not a leap of faith.
Others have done it.
Yes. The viability, the fiscal benefits, the strategic advantages, they've been proven by comparable organizations worldwide. The technical hurdles have been solved before.
Let's look at some examples they cite. Maybe start with the biggest, most security-focused one, the U.S. Department of Defense.
Right. The U.S. DoD and specialized agencies like DARPA are actually highlighted as pioneers in open data and open source reforms.
Really? In what way?
By strategically shifting massive data sets, critical documentation systems, and even specific operational platforms towards open standards and open source software, they've achieved huge cost avoidances. The sources quote figures exceeding US $1 billion annually.
$1 billion saved by the DoD through open standards. What was the focus there?
A major focus was on interoperability, making sure different systems could talk to each other, and crucially, avoiding vendor lock-in for mission-critical systems. They realized that being dependent on single vendors was a strategic risk they couldn't afford.
So the argument is, if the largest, arguably most complex military system in the world can successfully implement these kinds of open reform,
then the viability for India's MOD is demonstrably proven. It's not an insurmountable technical challenge.
what about working with allies? Interoperability seems key in coalitions, like NATO.
Absolutely. And organizations like NATO, as well as the EU Defense Agency, have actively worked on standardizing documentation formats precisely for this reason.
Does it make a difference?
According to the report cited, yes. Member states consistently report measurable efficiency improvements somewhere in the range of 2 to 5% related specifically to better data and document exchange.
Where do those efficiencies come from?
Mostly from cutting out the wasted time. Less time spent converting files between formats, less time troubleshooting compatibility problems when sharing documents between allies who use different national IT systems.
So everyone can reliably open and read the strategic documents instantly.
Exactly. Open standards become foundational for effective coalition operations. Smooth information flow.
Okay, let's bring it down to the municipal level. You mentioned Munich earlier, the LiMux project. That seems like a classic case study.
It really is the go-to example to counter the "it can't be done" argument. As we said, they shifted around 15,000 desktops from proprietary systems to Linux and OpenOffice, which uses ODF.
And the savings were?
Over $4 million in the first year, primarily from licenses. But remember the other key finding, the significant drop in IT support calls.
Right, suggesting better stability.
Yes. It confirms the idea that standardizing on a stable, open ecosystem can actually lead to greater reliability and lower total cost of ownership compared to constantly managing the updates and instabilities of a proprietary environment. It's not just about avoiding license fees, it's about reducing the internal admin burden, too.
That's a critical point. The total cost, not just the sticker price. Now, one of the biggest hurdles is always cultural change, getting people to actually use the new tools. Does anyone provide a model for managing that resistance?
The sources point to the experience of the United Kingdom's Home Office as a useful example of smart change management.
What did they do?
They didn't just issue a top-down ban on proprietary formats overnight. That often backfires. Instead, their policies strongly emphasize user support for the new open standards, training, help desks.
Making it easy to switch.
Making it easy, yes. And here's the critical policy lever. They made a commitment to never reject ODF documents. If someone submitted a report or form in the open format, it had to be accepted.
So they didn't force people to stop using Word, but they made using ODF the path of least resistance.
Exactly. By making ODF the preferred, fully supported, always accepted format, they gently but firmly steered users away from the old proprietary ways. It showed that successful cultural change needs patience, good support, and a clear, unwavering policy signal from the top. Acceptance, not just prohibition.
It seems clear then this isn't some fringe idea. It's a viable solution being used across the globe. Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands, Brazil are also mentioned.
Yeah.
Even parts of India's own public administration already recommend or mandate ODF.
Right. The precedent is well established.
So let's look at the actual blueprint proposed for the MARDI. How do they suggest making this happen? It's a 5-year plan, you said.
Yes. A detailed, structured, 3-phase implementation framework spread over 5 years. The design seems focused on managing the transition smoothly and ensuring accountability through strong governance, avoiding chaotic change.
Okay, phase I. That's year 1. What's the focus? Audit and selection.
Yes. Year 1 is all about getting absolute clarity and establishing control. First, a full, deep audit.
Auditing what?
Auditing all existing proprietary software dependencies across the MUD, identifying all the legacy archives that will need conversion, and crucially, identifying and quantifying those paid manual conversion practices that cottage industry needs to be mapped.
Shine a light on the waste?
Exactly. Simultaneously, they need to establish the dedicated Open Standards Implementation Task Force, SITF, probably under the Department of Military Affairs, to actually lead and champion the reform.
Give it teeth.
Yes. And perhaps the most important immediate step in year 1, mandate open format compliance for all new ICT procurements. Stop buying into the proprietary ecosystem from day 1.
Cut off the supply. Okay, that's year 1. Then phase 2 is years 2 and 3, pilot and migration, the testing ground.
Precisely. This is where they validate the plan and refine the approach before going enterprise-wide. They need to run pilot projects in carefully chosen strategic locations.
Like where?
The sources suggest places like the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, HQ, maybe the Mod Finance Wing, and one of the core institutions from the Army, Navy, or Air Force, controlled environments.
And what happens in these pilots?
This is where the real staff training on open source tools like LibreOffice begins seriously, likely using that train-the-trainer approach. Target the specialists first. At the same time, the technical teams start the complex work of converting high-priority legacy archives to that long-term PDF-A3 format.
Learning lessons before scaling up.
Exactly. Refine the training modules, test the migration tools, get real-world feedback from users.
Okay, pilot's done. Then phase 3 is years 4 and 5, enterprise standardization. This is the big rollout.
This is the full institutional shift. Extending the adoption across all the different commands, directorates, departments based on the successful models developed during the pilots.
What else happens in this phase?
Key technical work involves integrating the new documentation standards and metadata with the systems of the National Archives of India, ensuring long-term preservation is handled correctly. And a crucial governance piece kicks in here, a requirement to publish an annual interoperability audit.
An audit. To check if people are actually complying.
Yes. To publicly report on compliance levels, identify any remaining pockets of resistance or technical challenges, and ensure the benefits are actually being realized. It maintains pressure and transparency.
Speaking of governance, for a reform this big, avoiding bureaucratic pushback or quiet sabotage seems critical. How do they propose ensuring accountability?
The proposed governance structure is quite centralized and high level. Oversight is key. They recommend annual audits conducted specifically by the Mod Finance Wing and the Defense Accounts Department.
What are these audits looking for?
They're looking directly at the money trail, tracking software licensing costs to ensure they're decreasing, and explicitly looking for evidence of continued spending on those paid manual conversion services.
Hitting the waste directly.
Yes. Furthermore, detailed progress reports on the entire transition are mandated to be submitted directly to the Chief of Defense Staff, CDS, every March.
Link to the top.
Keeps the highest military leadership directly informed and accountable for the success of the reform. Transparency is also pushed by requiring all non-classified templates and policies related to this to be published openly on the defense intranet.
And what about that core ethical issue? Killing off the cottage industry of extraction? How is that enforced?
This needs to be explicitly written into policy to stop the ethical breach and the misuse of funds. The sources strongly recommend that the new policy must formally prohibit any compulsion for staff or external parties to use commercial software when contributing to public knowledge work.
No more must-use word mandates.
Exactly. And specifically, it must legally abolish all those paid manual conversion practices. That INR 5100 per page waste has to be explicitly outlawed and phased out.
So it's not just recommended, it's banned.
That's the proposal. The ultimate aim is to embed digital ethics and open source literacy into all mod training programs, making competence in open standard a normal part of professional development, maybe even a prerequisite for certain roles or promotions. It's about fundamentally changing the culture.
The whole roadmap seems designed to shift that culture, from relying on proprietary convenience, even when it's costly and risky,
To a culture of digital self-reliance, fiscal responsibility, and technical competence.
moving from a system where convenience dictates the cost to one where accountability dictates the tools.
And securing that strategic benefit of digital sovereignty through what seem like small, but actually crucial technical choices made every day. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground there. We started this deep dive talking about something as simple as a file attachment.
A docs file versus an .odf file.
Yeah. And we ended up deep in discussions about national digital sovereignty, potential annual savings of over INR 8,825 crore, that's over $1 billion a year, and the need to correct some, well, frankly, shocking bureaucratic inefficiencies.
The evidence laid out in these policy notes and ethical memos from Chandranath, it really does seem overwhelming when you put it all together.
The data really does seem to make a powerful case. Adopting open documentation standards, ODF for editing, PDFA for archiving, maybe structured tools like LaTeX for complex drafting.
It's presented not just as a technical upgrade you could do.
Yeah.
It's framed as a powerful act of fiscal responsibility, an ethical necessity even.
Because it eliminates that vendor lock-in, ensures data lasts long-term for critical records, helps different parts of the defense services work together smoothly.
Standardizes interoperability, yes. And maybe most tangibly, it stops that ridiculous waste of taxpayer money on completely artificial, redundant manual labor like those document conversions.
It seems the cost of convenience, the price of sticking with familiar proprietary tools, has just become far too high, both financially and strategically.
And the risks of that intellectual dependency, being beholden to commercial vendors for access to your own critical information, are just too severe to keep ignoring. This isn't really a choice between saving money or improving ethics or boosting security.
It's about doing all three at the same time.
That's the core argument. They're interlinked.
So this leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to chew on, a provocative one perhaps.
Yeah, the sources suggest that the biggest obstacle here isn't really the technology. The open source tools are mature, they work, it's not even the money, because the savings massively outweigh the costs.
What is it?
It's cultural inertia, institutional habit, the resistance to change. And this leads to the final challenge posed by the sources. If an officer or a researcher or an administrator working in a public body today insists they cannot handle or work with a well-structured open standard file like a PDF, then the problem isn't with the document format. It's not with the standard. It's not the software's fault.
The problem is.
The problem lies with a deeply ingrained, perhaps outdated personal or institutional workflow. A workflow that refuses to adapt, refuses to prioritize accountability, efficiency, and fiscal prudence.
So the choice of a file format, seemingly small, actually reflects a much deeper choice about stewardship and competence.
Exactly. What standard are you as a citizen holding your public institutions to? Are they choosing tools that serve the public interest or just the path of least resistance, regardless of the cost?
A challenging question to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the surprisingly high stakes of file formats and the cost of convenience.
We hope you feel much better informed about the hidden economics and the strategic side of those documents we all use every day.